Uh, Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Elena Miranchuk, a Deputy Director of MGIMO School of Business. And on behalf of MGIMO and MGIMO School of Business, I'm here to welcome all of you to our online discussion of Mr. Alexander Potemkin, trade representative of the Russian Federation in Austria, and Mr. Rudolf Lukavsky, commercial consular of Austrian Embassy in the Russian Federation. Thank you so much, Mr. Potemkin and Mr. Lukavsky, for holding that discussion. As you may know, our lecture was organized along with the Russian Austrian Public Forum Sochi Dialogue. So let me introduce, please, Maria Matveeva, the director of the Secretary of Sochi Dialogue. So I'm gonna hand it over to Maria now.
Dear Elena, thank you for this kind introducing. This lecture is organized in the framework of the online sessions of Sochi Dialogue together with MGIMO School of Business. And on behalf of the Sochi Dialogue, I should say that we're very grateful to you, Mr. Potemkin, and to you, Mr. Lukavsky, for finding time for us today, and for MGIMO School of Business for hosting us. Dear audience, dear participants, I will ask you to turn off your microphones while their presentation, firstly. And secondly, please write down your questions to our chat. And could I kindly ask you to mention also to note to whom the questions are addressed. All the questions into the chat, please. And now, it's high time for our presentations, and I will ask both of you, Mr. Potemkin and Mr. Lukavsky, to give us a general overview of the work and functions of trade representations, of peculiarities of work on the territory of both countries, maybe to give us also, a few words about challenges that were faced by some companies and assistance of trade representations in these issues. Could you kindly also talk about formats of interaction of business and trade representations? And now I'm giving the floor firstly to Mr. Potemkin.
Thank you. Dear colleagues, dear Maria and Elena, pleasure to me to participate in these two under the umbrella of these two institutions. It's a first time when I communicate in this format with these two institutions, and it's a pleasure to see Sochi Dialogue, which is a newly established and very prospective form of the cooperation between Austria and Russia, and I hope that I will be invited for the next meeting of Sochi Dialogue.
Of course.
And a few words and best regards from Vienna. As you understand, I am not in Moscow now, enjoying of being here in a very good, in a very nice Alpine Republic of Austria, and we are not on some isolation, some isolation. We are in an active role now, as my counterpart in Rudolf and Rudolf Lukavsky, and we can make now the not so boring presentation. So first of all, about Russian representative in Vienna or in Austria, in Austrian Republic. I think that it makes sense to start from the history, because this institution is one of the oldest Russian institution of among economic structure of not only Russian Federation or Soviet Union or even Russian Empire. This institution started as a so-called commercial agent of Ministry of Finance of Russian Empire at the beginning of 19th century, and then it was transformed at the beginning of 20th century in a commercial agent of Ministry of Industry and Trade of Russian Empire since 1913, and then after the due to the World War I, appeared a new institution on the Soviet at those time, or Russian trade representative. It started their work in 1921. Paradox, but 3 years before establishing of diplomatic relations between Austria and Soviet Union. So the trade was and economic ties considered more important. So that's why this institution started earlier. And then it works. Of course, it works in a framework of the main Soviet economy idea of the state monopoly of foreign trade, which of course seriously restricted the economic ties of market at the early stage, and then state enterprises, and they just only organized the relations between Austrian company and Russian foreign trade organizations, specialized foreign trade. And that was the practice of 20s, 30s. Then was opposed due to the Anschluss and the Second World War. And then this institution started working since 1946, just after the end of the war. And then more important that their full-scale activities was enlarged after the state agreement of the Austria, or independence of Austria, since year 1955. At those time, we were really start as a trade representation of Soviet Union. Not as a within a bodies of occupied system or organization. It's a different story. Yeah, and then was the long time, many decades, and as you know, since the 91, it was a dissolution of Soviet Union, appearance of at the beginning of 92, appearance of the Russian Federation, this institute was transformed in a trade mission, a trade representative of Russian Federation, of course, with a new roles. First of all, due to the market economy, we are first of all concerned about the establishment and development of the free market ties, pre-economic ties with Russian market structures, with Russian companies, and that was a new rule. Traditionally, Russian trade representative 3 decades after these changes was under traditionally again under Ministry of Economic Development, which was the higher of the previous institution, Ministry of Foreign Trade of Soviet Union. And so, but then a little bit more than 1 year ago, 2018, we were subordinate to the Ministry of Industry and Trade of Russian Federation. And that was not only just changes of the bosses, but also important changes in our activity. We should concentrate under the umbrella of this ministry on, first of all, on the development of Russian non-raw material, non-energy export, which is a great challenge. We will continue. Furthermore, I will comment all of that changes, but that was a substantial changes in our activities. And now I just show you one slide which illustrate the current activity. Current activity of just a moment, sorry. Yeah, okay, so not easy. Yeah, that is a tree which describe our activity now in Austria, in current state of our institution. Not so difficult to understand what does it mean, all of that rounds and other geometrical figures. That is, I start from the stem. There are three important things in our activity. This is promoting Russian business and support of Russian companies, support of Russian business missions, first of all, in Austria. My colleagues describe you the same activity in Moscow, in Russia, for for Austrian business missions in our country. And the third important subject is framework of intergovernmental cooperation, which is also traditionally is a part of our activity. So on the top of this slide, you could see the description of our activity in details from left to right. This is a cooperation in the energy sphere, which is one of the most important mechanism for us, because gas traditionally is a main product of Russian export up to now, up to 80 to 90% of Russian export, and that was a result of the very good changes in the relation between Russia or Soviet Union and Europe at the end of 60s, to be exact, 1968. It was established the big agreement, so-called gas pipe, and the Austria was the first country which promoted to this project, and since that time we start delivering this important hydrocarbon fuel for European industry, and Austria seriously win in their role as a first promoter, because the country became important transitional system for gas for Europe, and important hub for this type of transportation, and that is. And now they continue with we continue with this activity, and now the subject of our active relations is Nord Stream 2. Nevertheless, of that it's in the North Stream, in the North Sea, the Austrian biggest energy company, some kind of equivalent of Gazprom and Rosneft concern OMV or OMV, participate an active role among few in investing and supporting of this important pipeline and the new route of the delivery. Then the others understandable. I mentioned about non-raw material export. That maybe furthermore I will comment it. Export of services. I should mention just about that is services, I mean, transportation, tourism, IT, and I should mention the Bright-Spur project, which is a wide gauge railway route between Slovakia and Košice and Vienna, which will be the part of the so-called Silk Road between China and Europe, and that is a project which is on the track now, not in a construction, but important in the project side, in a project stage. About investment, maybe I will leave this subject to Mr. Lukavsky. And also important things for us now, we concentrate. Vienna is a headquarter of one of four headquarter of United Nations organization, and we can, as on behalf of Russian Federation, we can support of the participation of Russian companies in tenders, in deliveries of Russian goods for the world, for the humanitarian needs, through UN and UNIDO tenders, and that is also important things. And of course, Austrian exhibitions, which is also very attractive for Russian companies, concentrated first of all on tourism, on IT and automation or digitalization, and yeah, good. And so I'm a little bit out of time. So please, I will give the floor to my colleague.
Thank you very much, Alexandra. Now it's my pleasure to take over and welcome you all. I'm Commercial Counsel at the Austrian Embassy here in Moscow since 4 years. My history dates back to the early 90s when I was here for the first time. Since then, Russia has changed a lot. I will, in my first block, first of all, tell you who we are and what we do, but also since there are most of the participants are Russian participants, tell you a little bit about the Austrian economy and the bilateral relations, and then further on the activities which we are dealing with. I hope you see my presentation. It's readable? Yeah. So I will continue. First, who are we and how is our structure? As already mentioned, I'm head of the commercial section of the Austrian Embassy, or as part of the Austrian Embassy in Moscow, but at the same time, we are directly representing the Federal Economic Chamber as a non-governmental organization. We represent the interest of all Austrian companies which are by law members of the Federal Economic Chamber, but we are closely collaborating and representing also the interest of the ministries and governmental organizations which have economic perspective. That means the Ministry of Digitalization and Economy, and the Ministry of Agriculture, and so on. Our organization has more than 100 offices worldwide, and that means the commercial section of the Austrian Embassy in Moscow is one of those. We do not only have the responsibility for Russia, but also cover Armenia and Belarus from our, let's say, headquarters in Moscow. We also have small We call it Außenwirtschaftsbüro, small local offices, like branch offices in St. Petersburg, Yekaterinburg, and one employee in Sochi, and with our neighbors in Belarus and in Minsk. This is not a standard procedure with my colleagues in other countries, but since Russia is such a huge country, it's difficult to cover the whole country just from the capital, and also it gives us better access and better possibility of organizing events in the other huge industrial centers of Russia. But my colleagues from Moscow, Yekaterinburg, and Sochi are not only working in those cities or in those regions, but we share our work, and my colleagues extensively work for regional operations, for trade missions to Siberia, to the Russian Far East, to southern Russia, and all parts of Russia. We closely collaborate and cooperate. A short introduction to Austria. It's of course difficult to compare Russia with Austria, but I tried. Austria is a small but very active member of the European Union, with a population of less than 9 million inhabitants, but with a strong economy and with a highly exposed export sector, with huge activities with foreign direct investments and foreign trade. Austria is also heading or is also offering headquarters to many multinational companies. So not only Austrian companies operating via Vienna or Salzburg or other cities, many international companies from the United States, from Japan, and in particular from Germany use Austria as headquarters for, in particular, CE activities. I don't go into all the details since the presentation will be available for you after the presentation. I just wanted to use this information as additional. To compare Russia with Austria by size, it's of course impossible to compare. Russia, as the biggest country of the world, is 200 times larger than Austria. By population, the difference already is not as large, not as big. Russia is only 17 times bigger by the number of inhabitants. But if you compare the GDP, the gross domestic product, you see despite the small size of Austria, we have a strong and active economy, and there are many areas where we really can find good fields of collaboration for both in the interest of both sides. As you see, the foreign trade has peaked in 2012-2013. A large decrease was experienced in 2015. Since then, we have a recovery. 2019 in general was a good year for increasing our activities in Russia. For 2020, it most probably will be a difficult year for all of us. The reasons are obvious. On the one side, it's the Corona crisis, but on the other side, it's not only it is. It's a world the development in world demand, the oil prices, exchange rate. Of course, all those factors influence our bilateral activities. But as my colleague already mentioned, we have a fairly balanced export structure. Most of our export is machinery equipment, but also foodstuff, chemicals, pharmaceuticals. So we have a wide range of products. If one sector is doing well and others are declining, it's easy for us to do balance. The Russian export structure is still very much dominated by oil and gas and raw materials, but the percentage of processed goods is increasing over the years. But we're not only interested in foreign trade. Austria is very active with foreign direct investments. This is the international picture. So you see Austria invests close to 200 billion euro abroad, and we invest more abroad than we receive investment from abroad. And this is, of course, not only a recent development, but in particular in the past 20 years, we have increased our foreign activities significantly, and in particular in the CE, Central and Eastern European countries, we have increased our activities remarkably and strongly. These are the official figures from the Austrian National Bank. All those statistics, I have to mention, differ a little bit, whether you use Russian or Austrian sources. It's quite difficult because some of the investment is not going directly. You might find some investors which invest via Cyprus or Malta or even other countries. You see our investment stands at close to 6 billion euro, but it's a very, very strong investment can also be seen from Russia into Austria. More than 26 billion euro Russian companies have invested in Austria. This makes Russia the second biggest investor in Austria after Germany, but Germany as being our immediate neighbor and strongest business partner. This is quite maybe for some surprising. Austrian companies concentrate mostly on the European parts of Russia. Austrian investment is in various sectors. It's from oil and gas, but also in the paper and wood processing industry, packaging industry, food processing industry, automotive, construction materials. Also the services sector is important for us, from the banking to logistics, trade, and so on. With the first block, I would now like to stop and give back to Jelena. Thank you, and I hope you get some insight on our bilateral relations.
Thank you a lot for your profound answers. Anyway, COVID-19 is on the agenda everywhere in the world now. And of course, as you may expect, we would definitely ask you about the COVID situation. So could you please tell us about the measures that were taken during the pandemic by both countries? And now I'm turning the floor over to Mr. Lukavsky again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think you still see my presentation, so I can continue.
Yes, yes.
I won't concentrate so much now on the pandemic situation in Austria and the measures which are taken in Austria. My colleague Alexandra will a little bit elaborate on this. I will tell you what we are doing to how we support Austrian business, and in particular during COVID, but also in other times. Beside the activities which were already mentioned by Alexander Potemkin, I will add what are the activities which we are in particular offering Austrian companies doing business in Russia. We provide them with information on the market development, on searching business partners, consulting them in tax and legal issues, how to enter the market. And very important for us, of course, is also to support them with various events. Those platforms which I present here, those platforms are accessible for Russian and Austrian companies alike. We have a web portal which is Advantage Austria. Advantage Austria gives information not only on events but also on Austrian companies which are offering their goods and services to Russian partners, also in Russian language. We have Fresh View. Fresh View are brochures on specific sectors which are particularly interesting. For example, we recently published a Fresh View even in Russian language on aviation technology, where we have close to 200 companies presented which are offering technology and solution, for example, in the aviation industry. We are organizing showcases, trade missions, not only to Moscow, but to the various regions and on specific sectors and topics. The main parts, however, are not big and large events, but is our daily business, how we interact with Austrian companies. Altogether, we have contact to approximately 1,400 Austrian companies, which are which are contacting us, asking for questions on how they can find partners in Russia, how is the market situation in Russia, also if they're looking for cooperation partners, for suppliers, and crisis intervention. Crisis intervention might be that partners are not fulfilling the obligations. There are problems with restrictions on tax and legal issues, or as you have mentioned in the beginning, what are the challenges with Corona, with restriction on continuing activities during the Corona pandemic. This was, of course, one of the key questions over the past few weeks. We have helped them to get information how they could solve their activities and problems with their companies in Russia, but also whether it's possible for them to enter Russia, or but any questions around, you can imagine there are quite a lot of open and difficult questions during the past few weeks. On this, we have also organized a webinar for Austrian companies in the early days of the closure of the country, because in particular in the early days there was a lack of information. In between, things have settled down and companies have a better understanding on what are the challenges and problems. Advantage Austria I have already mentioned. these are the main events which we are still planning for this year, partly online, but partly offline. You see InnoProm, for example, we formally planned to participate as an offline event. Now we provide speakers for the InnoProm. Education and career exhibition was planned for March this year. Now it's postponed to November. We have rescheduled also trade missions. However, we also try to organize events and as online events. Next week we make a webinar for Austrian companies on e-commerce, and also an investor conference for Austrian companies in September, where they can discuss the challenges they have in front of them. Thank you. And now I give back the word to Yelena.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lukavsky. So please, Alexander Ivanovich, the floor is yours.
Yep. So, yeah, I'm ready. Just a moment, I will open the yeah. Окей. И еще так надо меня увидеть. Теперь я ушел. Да. Да, все. Yes. Нет, это не то. Just a moment. This is a previous one. Yeah. So I'm going deeper to supporting measures of Austrian company that were just a moment. Yeah, that sorry. Yeah, that were implemented by government of Austria. This is also sensitive for Russian companies deployed here and represents state-of-art experience of state regulation, which was interesting for Russian government. General idea of the introduced support consists first of all of maintaining the infrastructure of Austrian economy. That includes both large and small and medium enterprises, more than 90% of all companies, by the way, which with focus, of course, on, first of all, of SMEs. Such measures solve the problem of saving employment and providing social needs of the population. Here, I can mention looking on this chart on the main measures of the supporting measures of Austrian economy from Austrian government and regional authorities, which amount to 41 billion euro. First of all, this is a state guarantee of bank credits to SME and big companies. That is a fixed costs compensations for SME that both count for 15 billion euros. And also important things is subsidies for self-employers and micro enterprises, which is up to 9%. That is 2 billion euros. And very useful measure aimed at keeping the full employment or saving real working places is a compensation of lost income due to short time working day. for Austrian economy that largely depends on that largely depends on export. About 60% of GDP is the weight of Austrian of the export in GDP. The support of export activity plays a vital role, and that's why Austrian government continue and strengthen the support or issue export credit guarantees amount to 2 billion euros. Of course, as in Russia, in order to support companies quickly at the beginning of the Corona lockdown, there were introduced tax deferrals and tax reductions for companies that needed it, but mostly of them are needed, of course. And as for support for Russian companies in Austria, we see that Russian companies here are under the umbrella of these supporting measures and can use it for their stabilization. And I just mentioned the company like Lukoil or from the oil industry or Gazprom enterprises, which are including pipelines, not pipelines, sorry, подземные хранилища, газометр. This is the company like from the tourist sector like Testur, and they are among the Austrian companies. They are formerly Austrian companies, and they were enjoy of the different kind of measures supporting their activity. In general, we see that Austrian experience of economy of support of economy has been trend-setting, and for me as an economist, it was some kind of chance to see the elaboration of these measures a little bit earlier than it was started in Russia, due to that we have some time lag with the beginning of the Russian pandemic, and a lot of measures were produced before it was a lot of measures which were introduced before was done then in Russia, and our trade representation was actively monitoring the situation in Austria, and on the weekly basis transmitted the information of the introduced measures of to our Ministry of Industry and Trade, and I hope that our information was used while considering Russian supporting measures. Obviously, that was for us very positive and useful experience, and I'm sure that it was really a bright picture of the supporting measures, and maybe I hope not, but in the future that will be a part of the manual for that kind of efforts for economic regulations. Thank you.
Thank you a lot, Mr. Lukavsky and Mr. Potemkin, for this very, very graphic and illustrative presentation, considering the supporting measures. And of course, now it's high time to speak about the future anyway. So what opportunities, Mr. Lukavsky has already touched upon several events that are planned for the future. However, also I would ask you to talk about prospects for the development of Russian Austrian cooperation and economic business relations in general. Also, the future events that are planned are of great interest. So, Mr. Potemkin, I'm giving the floor back to you now.
Thank you. Just a moment. and a few words about the situation and the analysis of the previous situation, and our analysis of the potential of Russian-Austria relations. And I just repeat a few words which was described in a presentation of Mr. Lukavsky. This is a Russian custom statistics, a little bit different, but not substantially, and almost the same picture with the dynamic of Russian-Austrian foreign trade. Even the picture better than described by Austrian statistics. We could see the record level of turnover historically for last decades, more than $6 billion in year 2019. It was really a bright picture, achieved, of course, through the serious increase in the gas prices and in the gas deliveries in the Russian export to Austria. You could see more than approximately $3.5 billion, and don't forget that only maybe 1/3, 1/4 of the Russian gas fixed as a delivery for Austria, but others continue with delivery to Italy, to Germany, and so as I mentioned, Austria enjoy of their role as a transitional country. So, but even this consumption of the gas on the territory of Austria, or delivery of Russian gas, that created that good picture. But then was a coincidence of different kind of factors, but all of them are negative, unfortunately. Of course, that was the COVID situation, and the world, including the most powerful country like in economic powerful country like China, experienced a recession since the beginning of this year. Then it was a decline in oil and gas prices. That was a decline in the whole economic activities. And I also add some more measures, a little bit further. I mentioned about that, which also appeared on the eve of this pandemic, but they also play important role in the understanding of the what should be done for Russia, first of all, for Russian export for the future, and I will show that. That is the slide which describes our way of analysis, seeking our strengthening of our relations and strengthening of our export, and of course seeking diversification of Russian export and diminishing of the role of the gas and hydro carbon as a fuel in a point of deliveries. A few words, first of all, about Austrian strengths as trading partners, which is important things, and maybe not a compliment, it's a real picture. Yeah, obviously that Austria is a geographic center of Central and even partially Western and Eastern Europe, in the middle of Europe. The strong side is also international specialization of Austria, export of high-tech products. Not forget about agriculture also. A very high level of ability to pay of Austrian populations. Just mentioned that annual income per employee is about 43,000 euros yearly. Yearly, yeah. And what more? A country with high environmental responsibility, and if we will be successful in Austria, or our company will be successful with export in Austria, that will give us an access to Central and Eastern Europe and give this brand popular especially in the Czech Republic, Slovakia, Slovenia, Hungary, Balkan Republic, but also good reference to German market. And all of that things came to the conclusion which I described as a prospect for development of cooperation between Russia and Austria. I will skip up, and you will see all of that things. We select 6 important branches of Austria for Russian Austrian cooperations. You could see that on the right part of the screen. This is energy, machinery, chemistry, export services like transport, tourism, and IT, wood and pulp and paper industry, and food industry, agriculture, and that is main point of the interest for Russian for diversification of Russian export, and we will move in this direction after the COVID and start to think about that. And even before the COVID, we start thinking about that. But I just show you the way of our thinking and way of our seeking how to diversify export. That is more or less. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Potemkin. That was, well, very, very informative and also illustrative. For me personally, I found it extremely interesting. And now, Mr. Lukavsky, please, yeah, as I've already mentioned, you have already touched upon some events. However, in general, please, and also, yeah, maybe about some specific events for the future.
Thank you very much, Yelena. I've already mentioned some events which we are planning, the trade missions, presentations, but also the intergovernmental commissions, business councils. These are all platforms which offer good opportunities to make new contacts. On the one side, of course, we are very demand driven, so we don't make our plans on how the business should develop, but we rather follow the interest of the companies, whether it's medium-sized companies or large companies, but of course we try to focus on interesting sectors and branches. In a couple of words, I would say there are 3 directions which we want to develop for our further collaboration. On the one side, to explore new export markets in the Russian regions. Then secondly, to boost our investment and cooperation projects in Russia. And the third direction is also to support Russian companies in investing in Austria. When we talk about exports and cooperation and investment, it's very often interlinked. So you start with an export project, and you might find a cooperation partner. You normally start with small deliveries, and after a while, more intense collaborations continue. In general, it's about high quality goods and services which Austrian companies offer for the modernization and I would say diversification of the Russian industry. And the sectors have been mentioned already. All of them are interesting, whether it's automotive, aviation, metallurgical industry, chemical industry, wood and paper processing. When it comes to the diversification of the Russian industry, it can be building materials, can be packaging, it can be pharmaceuticals. A big focus, of course, is on modern technology and digitalization. The investment in Russia goes mainly in the machine building and infrastructure, in the agriculture and food industry. A very big focus on our side is also on environmental technology and energy. Energy not only in fossil energy, but also alternative energy. And one sector of big relevance for us is also the building sector, might also be green building, new building technology, and tourism infrastructure. In particular, winter sports infrastructure, where Russia has quite a lot of projects, and Austria a huge experience in expanding those activities. The Russian investment into Austria, so far there are very large companies which have invested from Russia in Austria in the oil and gas and banking sectors. But of course, it would furthermore be interesting for us to see more companies to invest not only in oil and gas and banking and real estate, but also in the other fields of industrial activities in Austria.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Potemkin and Lukavsky, for your well-developed and very informative presentations and discussion. And for now, I would like to give a floor to our audience, to our participants. I think we can move on to our QA session. We have already a lot of questions in the chat. So our first question from Vyacheslav Chikalin. If you are here, you can turn on your mic and ask your question out loud. Vyacheslav?
Thank you. Dear Rudolf and Alexander, thank you very much for your presentations. They were very informative. And my question is, first of all, to Alexander Ivanovich, could you please tell in more detail about the efforts of the Russian trade missions to promote Russian agricultural exports to Austria?
Maybe I could add and combine two questions. We have the second question, the same question for the products for construction. Thank you.
Yeah, but if you don't mind, I divide this in two parts. Yeah, first of all, about agriculture. That is a very important point for Russia, fastly developed agriculture sector, and of course there is very high interest of Russian companies, supported, by the way, by my colleagues and colleagues of Mr. Lukavsky from Moscow for the trade missions here in Austria. Of course, of course, there was some special programs organized by our Austrian colleagues to visit different kind of agriculture companies. Of course, there are traditional things like cattle breeding or vineyard or something like that, but also very important things is the organization which support the quality or so-called bio products in Austria, and which is highly interested in Russia. AMA organization also interesting for that, which is concentrate the experience and support and even financing of this activity in Austria. The rich opportunity for the understanding what is going on in agriculture in Austria give Russian companies the very popular agriculture exhibition or Messe, as in Deutsch, Rieder Messe, not far from Linz in or Upper Austria, and that is a different kind of things, and I'm happy to support, for example, big delegation from Krasnodar Krasnodar region, Krasnodarsky Krai, last year to participate in this not only just to see the exponents, but also to present the achievements for Austrian companies. Among them, I heard about very interesting point that for example, there is very popular in Austria to eat salad with pumpkin oil, Kürbis oil, mainly produced in Styria, in Steiermark. And I heard that Krasnodar Krai or Krasnodar region deliver a lot of pumpkin seed to support this industry as a raw material, but that is so now I enjoy of this Steiermark oil, not only because of the taste, but also of the taste of the honor that our colleagues participate in the production of these things. More or less, that is in a short way answer. So as for the constructive materials, of course, first of all, I should mention about the wood. Wood is a key thing which is interesting for the Austrian industry as a raw material, as a constructive materials, and among them there is very strong exhibition and purchasing point, selling point, not far from Vienna. So-called Blau Laguna or Blue Laguna Center, which propose a lot of houses produced by Austrian companies, but not only for Austrian, but also for foreigners, which visited this exhibition. And among them appeared a new product combined by Austrian and Russian companies from Tambov region, and as far as I know, 200 houses was a plan, because it was interrupted by COVID, but it was a plan for a year of selling this. And of course, a main part of this building was timber or wood, and not on the surface inside the building, but create a health and comfort for that kind of buildings. So that is an example, and shortly speaking, that is an example of it, for an answer for that question.
Thank you so much, Alexander Ivanovich, for your answer.
Well, the next question considers, absolutely different topic. It is about ecology, and the question is to Mr. Lukavsky. Considering the bilateral programs between Russia and Austria, are there any? Maybe are there any planned initiatives, and are there any Austrian eco companies that are based in Russia?
Yes, first of all, there are bilateral working groups who are also talking on collaboration in all kinds of technology and development. Environmental technology is one of the areas where Austrian companies are very active. The one side is services for waste management. It's planning, it's equipment, it's consulting. Here is I think on the one side a big demand, but an interesting area of collaboration. But also on the other side, when we talk about eco companies, it's also about environmental friendly technology on filters, on wastewater treatment, and all kinds of equipment to improve the ecological standards of the industrial plants in Russia. This is one very, very strong focus for our activities. Yeah.
Thank you a lot for the answer. It's, honestly speaking, it's a very special topic for me also, because I'm also working with ecological initiatives a little bit. So yeah, thank you for the answer. Our next question is considering the pandemic, and I think could I kindly ask Augustina Pishaeva, Mrs. Pishaeva, if you are here, could you kindly ask your question out loud?
Hi, thank you very much. I would like to say, dear Mr. Lukavsky and Mr. Potemkin, would you please tell me what were the main difficulties both of you faced in your professional life due to the coronavirus pandemic? Thank you for the attention. With respect, from Bulgaria.
Should I start first, or Alexander? Huh? No, I think for my personal life, I feel safe and well kept in Moscow. I have the advantage of having my apartment just 10 minutes walking distance from the office, so this has been never an issue. But of course, it was a difficult time for all of us because the access to real-time information on how all those restrictions and regulation work in reality. What are the regulations for companies to operate? Whether they are able to receive permissions for their staff to come to the office? How is the propusк system? How the immigration issues? It's been a difficult time, and we have been in very close contacts with the Russian authorities on the one side, with legal experts who helped us with clarifications, and those Austrian companies who are operating in Russia. But I think all have understood it's not an easy and standard situation, and it's we will manage all together.
Thank you a lot for the answer.
Yeah, please. Thanks for having me and my family and my colleagues here in these premises in Vienna. All escape of this conjunction, and we're happy that first of all, due to the strong measures of Austrian government, and we feel it, and even enjoy of the law.
The next question is to Mr. Potemkin, Alexander Ivanovich. Could you kindly tell us more about Russian trade missions to Austria? What is the most common format, and how do you promote cooperation between Russian regions and Austrian federal states?
Mm-hmm. Thank you for this question, because I couldn't cover some of these topics, and maybe make sense to say about it. Common format, we are really open for any contacts, and immediately react for the questions or written questions from Russian or Austrian company in both languages, and that is not just a phrase, but it's a real practice, and it is a great concern for us to react immediately for any of that kind of questions, and or to establish the relations, or to find for example, for Russian companies to find the potential partners in Austria, using our wide ties of the knowledge, but also and acquaintance, and also using that bright organization which is in Austria, which is VKO, or bosses of Mr. Lukavsky, I mean Austrian Chamber of Economy, and that give us a unique opportunity not only for establishing the relations, but also organize the business missions of Russia and the premises of this organization, and supporting us from the translations from the technical things, and that help us. And also about the cooperation about Russian regions, that is a very important point of our activity. From 15 to 20 big regional missions, I mean, representing one subject of federation, so-called, yeah, among 80, yeah, as you know, 80, 85. And so now from 50 to 20 regions yearly represent their activity on offline, as now say in mostly in VKO, in Chamber of Economy of Austria, or here in premises of the trade representative. And also with federal states, better to say about, to mention about the, so in this case about intergovernmental relations, because that is the key things for our activity. I mean, as I mentioned about the our intergovernmental commission, 7 working group under them, which comprise of Austrian and Russian representative of ministry and of state organizations, and that is the head of the co-chairman of this intergovernmental body now is Minister of Economy and Digitalization of Austria, Mrs. Margaret Schrambeck, and Mr. Choichenko, which now is Minister of Justice. Yeah, that is a maybe top of the top organization which organize our relation. And of course, we have a lot of support from regulative bodies of Austrian government, different kind of ministries. If necessary, we organize even a meeting in these ministries for Russian big companies or Russian governors or Russian companies. And also, I should mention definitely the Russian Austrian Business Council. This is a very influential organization. We are expecting happily the offline meeting of this organization in Vienna, to be exactly on 27th of October. It was planned now. And there will be maybe hundreds of the participants from both parts, and that is a unique opportunity to start live contacts, to restart live contacts with our partners from both sides. Thank you.
Yeah, you know, Mr. Potemkin, we're also very waiting on behalf of the Sochi dialogue, because lots of our events, also our sessions that were planned during the St. Petersburg Economic Forum, that was to be held in summer, were also postponed. So we're also waiting a lot.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Potemkin, for your answer. But we have another question for you from Maxim Zholdev. Maxim, if you're here with us, you are welcome to ask your question.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. I think partly my question has been already answered, but more specifically, I understand well the global approach of our trade mission, but is there a real practical way for smaller enterprises to get some support in promotion, in contacts, and in all this stuff in Austria? And because from the point of key performance indicators for the trade mission, it is absolutely not comparable to the gas branch or whatever. And if yes, how should we exactly contact whom and where and how? Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you again for these questions, because I couldn't brace all the subjects, but that is really something which we should develop more rapidly rather than other branches, and interest from both parties is very high. And a few words. First of all, of course, we have some contacts, different kind of contacts with Russian companies from IT segment, which is close to your question. And with global, like Skolkovo, we organized the contacts with the same organization in Austria, and also with even from the segment of SME. And most of the IT is close to this kind of medium-sized enterprises. We organized the meeting with the partners, with the sometimes with the ministry, which promote the contacts of this organization with the Austrian companies. Just mentioning, for example, not to be just in a general things. For example, Russian company, one C is a accounting and IT company, big, quite popular in Russia. Now we are supporting their representative in their contacts with the Austrian companies. Before it was a Russian big company in IT, EBI, you know, from the dictionary, for example, this company, and we also established the relations. And what more? And of course, we ask them to participate with that kind of companies, participate in in the Austrian local exhibitions, like, for example, smart automation and C4I. That is the longer name of this exhibition. Very unique, very interesting, and for example, a Russian company, Kaspersky, with our support, participated in this previous exhibition, and we hope to see that not in this year, but maybe next. Not maybe, but I'm sure that it will be in Austria. That's a traditional. That is also a channel how to deliver your ideas and find the contacts with Austrian counterparty. More or less, I hope I answer.
Yeah, I think that it was more than a profound answer.
Very much.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, the last question is about, the last question for now. I don't know, maybe there will be any in the future. But the last question considers the business forum. Is there any plans of organization the Austrian-Russian Business Forum in future in Vienna? Well, from my side, I must say that there have already been one in Sochi last year, before our first Sochi dialogue session. It was also held in Sochi. So, is there any plans for organizing business forum, maybe one of the same format or a different one, in Vienna, in Austria? Yeah, and for whom is this question? To whom is that question is addressed?
I think Alexander also already mentioned that there will be the business council on the 27th of October, and also Gregor Postel, who is the head of the Eastern Europe desk in the Federal Economic Chamber, is our contact person there. Is my colleague who is helping together with Alexander Potemkin to organize this event. But some other events are in preparation. Due to the pandemic, it was a bit difficult to plan those business missions and business forums in Austria at the moment, as of course is the case in Russia. But there are regularly many business forums in Austria and in Russia. In Russia, not only in Moscow, but in some other cities, which we promote together. On the one side, our colleagues from the trade representative in the Russian Embassy, and on the other side from our office, from the commercial section in Moscow, together with the Federal Economic Chamber back in Vienna. We will keep you posted.
A few words just. First of all, I want to greet my old friend Alexander Mereshko. Happy to see you, and in a good stance, I hope. And thank you for this question. And just I really now close to the main body in charge of that kind of things. I mean, WKO, and we are discussing future plans, and yeah, all things which mentioned I before, or Rudolf before said now, that is on the track. But I mean, Sochi dialogue, maybe some formats for economic formats give us an opportunity to changes of the views even in this year, and of course Russian Austrian Business Council. But also I'm happy to feel that Austrian Chamber of Commerce of Economy are interested to organize some more meetings even within autumn or beginning of the summer of the winter of this year, but it will be in the format of the representation of business mission, maybe one or two give a chance to do it in Vienna. And also the future year, if everything will be okay with the pandemic finally, but we seriously hope to restore the practice of the so-called Day of Russian Regions in Austria. That is a very popular and very good opportunity for many companies and regions to be presented at the same time, to meet partners or to find partners, and we also maybe make an effort to do it in next year, and our Austrian partners are ready to support these ideas. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your answers. I think we are done with questions. No more questions in the chat. So on behalf of MGIMO School of Business, I should say that we are highly grateful to both of you, Mr. Potemkin and Mr. Lukavsky, that you found time to make that informative discussion. And I want also to thank our participants of the discussion for your interest and for your questions. Thank you for being active. And of course, we are looking forward to our future cooperation.
As also, on behalf of the Sochi dialogue, I want also to thank both of you, Mr. Lukavsky and Mr. Potemkin, for your presentations and for finding time. Well, I hope that there will be much more future events of our future cooperation also in the framework of Sochi dialogue. Thank you a lot. Thank you a lot.
Also, thank you from my side for having the opportunity to talk to you. If there are any further questions, please don't hesitate to contact us. We're very glad to be part of this webinar.
I want to thank you, first of all, these pretty ladies, which give us an opportunity to meet each other and enjoy the contacts and communications, and the opportunity to describe our activity. I mean, Austrian and Russian trading missions, and that is I think the things which is good for the further involvement of my colleagues from other trade missions. Maybe it came to you that kind of idea now, but for me it's enjoyable, and I feel myself quite satisfied the opportunity that with this forum, online forum, but we start, I hope, the season of the offline contacts and activity with Austrian and Russian companies. Thank you very much for this forum, for this conference.